started. Yeah, so yeah, I'm here to present the Nomad software, the Nomad ELN. My name is Markus Schaltgen. I work for the Fermat project at the Humboldt University in Berlin. My official title there is the infrastructure coordinator, which basically means I'm in charge of all the technical aspects of the Nomad software and also the Fermat project. I will start my presentation with a few slides on background, right? And then we jump into the demo. And at the end, I have a summary of how I think that Nomad is different from the other ELNs. Okay, so let's get started with some background. So what is Fermat and what is Nomad? Fermat is the NFDI consortium to build a fair federated data infrastructure for solid-state physics. So in more practical terms, this means that we hire 25 people for the next 5 years, and those people can now help the solid-state physics community to manage, share, publish their research data, right? So we are organized in different areas. This is what the circle is showing here. One area is the infrastructure area, and here we are developing the Nomad software. So we have 10 developers here sitting in Berlin that can focus on the core functionality of the software. And then we have 15 other people that are going to our partners and trying to help them to adapt Nomad to their laboratory, do all the extensions that are necessary to adapt this to certain specific methods and so on. And the idea here is that if Fermat is doing this for like a representative set of scientific methods and show that Nomad can work here, that we can hopefully then inspire the larger community to also adapt our ideas and our tools. So what is Nomad? Nomad is a web-based software for fair research data management in material science. And here the Nomad software comes in 2 flavors. One is a central public service that everybody can use. You can go to it right now. And then the other flavor is the Nomad Oasis. Here the idea is that you can take the Nomad software, install it in your institute, and then you can basically start managing your data locally and in private. And the idea is you basically take all your research data, all your files, you put it into Nomad, and then it's the responsibility of the Nomad software to make your data fair, right? To make it findable, interoperable, accessible, and reusable. And the idea is at some point on your local Oasis, when you say, okay, now I'm ready, now I want to share my data with someone, with a collaborator, or I want to publish my data, that you can then transfer the data to the central system, and then the central installation of Nomad acts as a portal for everyone to discover what information, what data is in the network, and get all the fairness from there. I brought a few screenshots. So the Nomad software goes a little bit further back than Fermat, and it didn't really start it as an ELN in the first place, right? Originally, it was a repository for computer simulations, like most CDFT simulations. So if you go there, this is like what our search interface looks like. Here on the left, you have like lots of different filter menus, and then each filter menus gives you a set of options. And here you can click through, and you can check certain criteria to search for elements on Nomad, right? It's a little bit like what you see on Amazon or eBay or whatnot. And then for each entry on Nomad, you get this overview page, and then it depends on the type of entry, right? You will see certain information, like here it's a computer simulation, right? You get something about the material and then some properties plotted and stuff like this. And then Nomad also offers you Jupyter notebooks that you can use to access this data and then start to programmatically analyze it, visualize it there or whatnot. And this is all only possible because Nomad makes the data machine readable, machine actionable, right? And this is what this view shows a little bit. This shows the process data of a particular entry. This basically happens for all Nomad entries. You get this view where you can see the data in its structured form, right? So, and this is all then backed by a formal schema where it's well defined what information is available, what section is contained in what section, what quantities are in what sections, what are the, I don't know, the names of quantities, what are the units of quantities, what are the particular shapes of quantities. So when you start dumping files into Nomad, Nomad is trying to go through the files, analyze the files, and pass this information out of it and create these consistent hierarchies of information. And this is then the backbone for all the searchability, for all the analysis and all the stuff that you can do with the data. Now, the thing is that not all data comes in files, right? It's not always that you have a simulation. It's not always that you have an instrument or something like this. Like sometimes information comes from humans, and this is where the idea of ELNs comes in. And our idea was, okay, we already have this schema system. We already have this view. The only thing that we need to do now is to make this an editor, right? To make this data editable. And then you can start using this as an ELN. And since we didn't really saw any ELNs on the market at the point in time where we saw this very specific schema focus or the strong focus of structured data, we started to think it's a good idea and added some ELN functionality into Nomad. And this is what this presentation is about. But before I can jump into the demo, let me have a few words on what is structured data and what are schemas and stuff like this. Typically, it starts with something like this, right? You have like this kind of manual note-taking, like strictly speaking, like very unstructured information. Often it's only sensible to the author itself. And then if you ask the author 10 years back, then even the author typically has problems interpreting the information there. The first step that most people are doing is like that they digitize their note-taking, right? Using apps like this here. And then it becomes a little bit better. The data becomes somewhat structured, right? You have files, and then within the files, you have like, I don't know, you have these bullet points and whatnot, little pieces of numbers and so on and so forth. So it gets a little bit better, but it's still hard to interpret for an outsider or a computer even. So the next tool that many people are using are Excel files. This is one of the files that come from the example set that Jörg was just mentioning. So here data is a little bit more structured, right? Here you have these column and row structure, and you have cells that then contains numbers and whatnot. So if you would want to, you could write a script for this, right? You could open the Excel file, read out the numbers and do something with it. But the question is, what happens if you have like 100 of these Excel files? Is the data really consistent in these Excel files, right? And what most people do here is they employ some kind of template mechanism. This is also what most of the ELNs are offering. That you basically take this one example and then you send it around and ask your colleagues to please fill it out in the same manner, right? Try to use the structure that you are giving. And then you collect all the files, and sometimes it works and sometimes it does not work because people are interpreting the columns in the wrong way or not putting in the right numbers, or sometimes even deliberately deviating from the set structure because of circumstance and whatnot. And this is then where the idea of the schema comes in. Where we want to formalize like this soft contract that a template offers into a more stricter contract that we call a schema, where we basically predefine what information has to be put in and how this information has to look like. Right. So this is the same example now in Nomad based on a schema that I created for this presentation. So if you look here at the table columns and if you look at these things, it's basically the same information. And now I think it's a good time to jump in the demo and look like how this does look in the actual application. So let me jump into Nomad. So this is a Nomad Oasis. It's a local installation. It's almost empty. This is the view that you typically take when you want to look at your project, your uploads, what we call them in Nomad. Like here you see I have one project here that I created for this presentation here. And there are a couple of entries in this project. The project isn't published yet, so it's only visible by me, and so on and so forth. And then I can jump into the project. And then the project overview offers me a few ways of adding more data to the project, right? I can start dropping in files here. Can also have a look at the files that are already there. So here I basically dumped some of the files that come from the example data set. And here in this file structure, you see, okay, there's pictures, or there's text files and whatnot, but there are also some entries that are labeled specifically. And these are these files that make some sense to Nomad, right? That were created with the Nomad ELN and that are interpreted by Nomad, that have structured data in it. And for example, one of the files is called schema, right? This is the file that contains the schema that I've written for this project. And then based on the schema, we created the other entries here. Further down here, this is where if you don't want to upload files, if you really want to create entries in Nomad when you want to use the ELN, this is where you would create kind of new entries, and there are some built-in schemas that you could use, but you can also then use the schemas that you uploaded. Like in my case, it's like this schema that I created for the example data set. And then in the schema, I defined certain data objects that you can then choose from, right? So you could create a new POR analysis, you could create a new tensor test, and so on. And then further down, we have a sortable list of all the entries that are built in this way. Like here again, we see some of the examples that I put in. Like I put For one of the samples, I put in the pore analysis, a tensor test, and so on. So maybe let's start with the pore analysis. That's the one that we just saw in the screenshot, right? So this is what the overview page looks like. And here you see, based on the schema that I've defined, you have like exactly the information that you also saw in the exit table. We always have like this detailed view where we can jump into the structured perspective, so to speak, of the data. And here we then also can see, okay, there's a pore analysis object. Then this can have children's, like these planes, for example. In the exit table, it was like this contraption where you have a table in a table kind of thing. Here, I really modeled it as like this hierarchy, right, where the planes are the children of the pore analysis, and so on and so forth. And all that you can see here, all the form elements, they come from a schema that was defined, right? You can also look at the schema. That this is what we can look here. Now we have it side by side. It's basically one example data point, right? And then here we have the schema. You see the similarities, like we have all the quantities here, and the same quantities appear also here. And now if I look at a certain definition, let's say this D layer, I didn't really knew what it was. I just saw the Excel table column, so I just kept the name D layer. And then here, this is the definition. Yeah, you can then have a formal description. So if you don't want to guess what D layer means, you can write down what it's supposed to be. I was just guessing it's probably the thickness of the sample or something like this, right? But you would then also define what is the data type to use for this quantity, what is the shape of the quantity, like here it's a float, it's a scala, and it has the unit meter attached to it, right? And then based on this information, Nomad can generate like these form fields, like this is the form field for this D layer here. And then information is also used to make the form field work. So I really have to type in a number. I can't really just type in something, right? I would get an error message like this. Or the system is interpreting units. So if I go from micrometer into millimeters or something like this, the unit would change. Or I can also go back to micrometer again. I can also translate between the units. So I could jump from micrometer to meter, stuff like this, right? But you see it's only showing the compatible units, right? It's only length units here, right? It's really interpreting the unit. And this is all to help the users of the ELN to enter consistent information and don't deviate too much from the schema. Another example is here in the planes, for example, we have this percentage, right? If I would type in something that is outside of the typical bounds of all the percentages, I would also get an error and stuff like this. Yeah, then of course, besides just adding data manually, you can also link to files. This is what I exemplify here with the images. So I created this child section that is attached to pore analysis that can contain images. Here there's a file reference, so that's a file that is already uploaded to Nomad. You could also use this button to upload more files and so on. Then of course you can also look at the image, right? You can download the image and so on. And here for the image, I also added like this observations quantity, so to speak. And this is basically an example where you say, okay, maybe a schema is not always right? At some points, I can't structure my data anymore. I have to give some room for people to just express human observations and stuff like this, but it's not sensible to use the formal schema. And then you can use this escape hatch of a rich text quantity that helps you to add more nodes and stuff like this. Okay, maybe let's look at another example. So this was the pore analysis. Maybe let's look at the tensor test here. So here now it's a different type of object, a different schema, so it looks completely different, right? We have different form fields, different data. Here we also see a plot. Let's see how this plot comes to be. So if I click here, we see that the tensor test has like this attached real-time data section, which is connected to a text file. If we look at the text file, this was also in the example data set, right? Then we see, okay, this the simple CSV data here. What we can do with Nomad is we can tell the schema to interpret the file as a CSV file, right? To interpret this file reference here as a CSV, and then tell it to map the certain columns into these quantities here. So these quantities are now not added by human, right? They're just read from the file and populated here. So the times that you see here and the forces and so on, they're all taken from the CSV file. And then in the schema, we can define if we want to see a plot of this data, and then this plot is shown right here. And the cool thing now is that if you would like to analyze this data and later on take a notebook and the API to actually go through the data, right? You would basically get a data object that already looks like this. So you don't really have to deal You don't really have to deal with certain file formats and stuff like this. You already have treated this correctly, and now we have all the data combined in this JSON type of format and can start working with it. Yeah, speaking of analysis, maybe I show this also in Nomad for the upload. Like here you see all the files and stuff like this. We can also upload Jupyter notebooks, or we can create Jupyter notebooks, and we integrated a Jupyter hub with Nomad so that you can also run the Jupyter notebooks, right? So let's try this. So this is basically the notebook that I have in my upload here. Here they just exemplify what you could do now with this Jupyter hub integration. So for example, all your uploads, all your project get now mounted into this into the container that runs this notebook. So I can open the file, for example, right? The stuff that I just edited with this ELN editor, I can simply open and read certain data from this file. Or another way is I can use the API, and we also have a Python package that allows you to use the API more conveniently, and I could start reading some data from the API. Right here you see the time series that we just saw from the tensor test data. And you see it's already an array, it has the attached user to it, so all the information is available. And then you could start using, I don't know, matplotlib or whatever, or start analyzing it in some other way. Yeah, this is our Jupyter Hub integration, that makes it very nicely to start analyzing your data, not just entering your data. Okay, what else can we show? So maybe a last thing. Now we have this sample, right? We have all the different tests that we did, all the different characterizations, the pore analysis, the tensor test, some SEM images and whatnot. How can we tell that these are somehow connected? And here I created another entry, a sample entry, which basically just shows some descriptive information, but then also allows to connect these different elements to references, right? So in Nomad schemas, you can also define references, and you can basically say that the sample can be connected to a tensor test, it can be connected to a pore analysis, it can be connected to a SEM image, and so on and so forth. And then when you make these connections there, then you can also browse them and jump into the tensor test and get the information from there. One important aspect here is that these references are also typed. So for example, the quantity that is referencing a SEM image will only allow me to choose from SEM images, right? I can't really put a tensor test in here or something like this. Again, this is another piece of the contract, right? So if you start then analyzing your samples and you're asking for the SEM image, you are sure that you get a SEM image and not something else. Yeah, I think this is the basics of what I wanted to show. Here. Again, the idea is to have this strong schema focus. So everything in here is basically defined in a schema and guides the people, guides the researchers in the lab to enter the information exactly in the way that it later then becomes consistent. Which is especially important if it's not just you, right? If you're collaborating with your colleagues or with external partners, if you want to later publish this, that all the information has this consistency and becomes interpretable by others. In other words, that the data is fair. Okay, now let me jump back to the presentation here for the last few minutes. So we had the demo. Yeah, I wanted to summarize a little bit where I think the strengths and weaknesses of Nomad lies. Obviously, this is like somewhat biased, and you have to make your own observations, of course. So this is my view on this. On the pro side, what Nomad does, it organizes all your data in files, which makes it very easy to import new files or to also to export projects, right? You can just download everything and you will just get a zip file with all the information in it. Also, the stuff that you enter with the ELN, it just becomes JSON files that you can download and keep forever. If for some reason you want to go away from Nomad or whatnot. You can also use our API. The system is written in a way that everything is available via API. Everything that you saw we did with the UI was going through the API. So all functionality is available there. We also integrated the Jupyter Hub, which makes it then very easy for you to start programming with your data. Jupyter Hub also allows you to run other tools on your data. So you can even have desktop tools that then run through some browser virtualization and stuff like this. So you can design and set it up in a way that the whole lab is like losing a whole set of tools without everybody needing to install it and to configure it and whatnot. Nomad already supports like a number of file formats, and this is a growing number. For example, it's also like the Nexus format, which is like now very interesting for all the experimental people. Maybe that's also for the MatWerk community. I don't know. But also Nomad is extendable, right? You can also add your own parsers and stuff like this. And then we have the ELN functionality, which is like, it has this schema-focused flavor to it to produce consistent and fair data. And then later on, you can also use Nomad. It's not just an ELN, right? You can also use it to share your data, to publish data, and so on. On the negative side, again, Nomad has this schema focus, right? Which requires you to do something first, right? You can't use it right out of the box. It's designed to be an extendable system that you need to adapt to your needs, to your laboratory, to a specific method, and so on and so forth. So that's probably not everybody's kind of taste, but we think if you really want to make your data fair, that's the right way to go. I know that already people are using ELNs, and the existing ELNs already have some proliferation and so on and so forth. So that's why we also plan or started to build on integrations with other ELNs so that you can get data from other ELNs via API and put this into the Nomad system. Again, Nomad is more than just an ELN, and if you want to use the other aspects in combination with existing ELNs, you hopefully can do this in the future. And the last negative side is not really a negative side in a permanent sense, but we are a very young project. We just started with the ELN functionality in Nomad in the beginning of this year. So not all the features are there yet. We also, everything that you saw right now still has this beta label attached to it. We are already asking our partners and interested people to install it, to try it. And we have some bigger names who are doing some serious piloting with it. But it's not an ELN that is around for the last 10 years, right? Okay, maybe as a last summary, if you look at ELNs and different dimensions of features you want to have, right? If you look at fairness, extensibility, scalability, I would think that Nomad is very strong on these aspects. But if you want to have a simple low maintenance solution, then Nomad is not the right choice for you, because we really want to encourage people to do the schema focused approach, do some thinking on how to structure data, and do all the advanced work before you then can use the tool. Okay, then I hope that the slides get shared. There's a last slide with lots of links and stuff. If you want to have more information, look at more videos, get started installing it or whatever, you will find everything here. Okay, thank you very much. And I think my time is out anyways.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Markus. You are really, you had a really good time management. We have some 3 or 4 minutes for questions. And I didn't mention it in before. Please do or ask questions in the normal way. Raise your hand or ask questions in the chat. And I believe Stefan or Elisabeth will manage that. And Stefan and Elisabeth, you call somebody who raises his hand first, and then the question can be asked.
Okay. Yeah. First one is Professor Tillmann Beck, please.
Yeah, hello. I hope you can hear me. Is this the case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you for the impressive presentation. One question arose to me from the cons you shown in the actual last slides, where you mentioned that it's a young, constantly evolving project. So this has risen my question about compatibility of future versions with the existing ones. How will this be assured?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we want to be consistent as possible, right? So you don't really want to scare your customers and whatnot. So it's not evolving in this sense that we are turning everything around left to right with every version, right? It's more evolving in the sense that we are adding more types of information. So if we are looking at more and more scientific methods and plan to add more parsers, more support for different file types. And then there are other particular things where we want to evolve a core set of schema base classes, so to speak, right? Because right now you would basically need to define everything from scratch. And what we want to achieve with the Fermat project is to hopefully achieve some common sense or some unique view on data within the community, right? To agree on a certain schema. For example, that everybody can agree, okay, this is what the schema, what the sample typically looks like. This is what the pore analysis typically looks like. And then also provide these schemas as something that is part of the software itself, so that you don't have to define everything from scratch. It's more in this sense, right?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have time for another question? Stefan, who is?
Microphone was off. Dr. Lenz, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the appealing software. I have essentially two short questions. So one thing is, what comes after the Fermat project, so to say? Who's taking care and who's paying for the developers in, I don't know, 5 or 10 years for this piece of software? And the second question concerns access control list. So how granular is the access control to the individual pages in your system? So
yeah, okay.
Especially if you talk about medical data or something, you are very restrictive who can access the data.
Yeah. So let me answer the last question first, because it's easier. In the beginning, I showed you that you can organize your stuff in projects, right? And then each project has like this file hierarchy attached to it. And the granularity is on the project level. Right? So for each project, you can define who is the owner of the project, who are editors of the project, and who are reviewers of the project. So if you have like particular needs, you basically have to design it around the project structure.
Okay, thanks.
And then the first question, yeah, NFDI only goes for 5 years and hopefully for 10 years, right? And then the money runs out. The main idea is, of course, that if we are successful with this, if people start using this, and if we really populate the central service and people are using this, that there will probably always be projects and money to actually do this. Maybe as a little bit proof of history, Nomad, the central service already exists since 2014 and was going through multiple projects. So there are 2 European projects that were financing this in between, and Max Planck project in between. Now it's Fermat. So it's basically being handed off from project to project. And I think as long as we are doing sensible stuff and produce a service that's actually used by the community, we will always find new projects to keep on going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Marcus. I think we run out in our discussion time. We had a lot of other hand raisers. Let's try to shift this discussion at the end of session 2. We have half an hour or something like that at the end of session 2, and maybe we can cluster some of these questions. And I think also all the questions or hints from the chat we can put together and then finally discuss it at the end. Yes, we go on, and next one is Nicola from Deltaplot, and I believe Stefan, you give Nicola the right to share the screen, maybe?
Yeah, it's all right. Thank you.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you.
The stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to the organizers for